I'm Kieran.
And I'm Riku.
Welcome to Artificially Ever After
Short Stuff. So, Studio Ghibli versus OpenAI. What we're going to talk about today, Kieran?
Okay, so we're talking about a new AI image generation model, which OpenAI released. And just to set the scene a little bit, because this is all kind of crazy stuff that literally just a few years ago, we've gone from AI being barely able to draw like a blurry cat, that it can now produce photo quality, like photorealistic images, intricate artwork from just like a simple prompt, just a single bit of text to describe what you want, and it does it perfectly. It understands all the nuances of what you want, and it can copy perfectly like human styles that we know, which is why, as the title suggests, Studio Ghibli, which is a Japanese animation studio. You may have come across some huge movies and TV shows, but Spirited Away, I don't know, what's your favorite?
Howl's Moving Castle. Yeah.
And you may have seen online, it's absolute storm of people generating images in the style of Studio Ghibli animations and artwork. So, we're going to be talking a bit more broadly about the model quickly today, but this kind of copying and mimicry of Studio Ghibli helps to set the scene of like much broader copyright and kind of ethical questions, which we're going to briefly tap into.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a bit later, but I think this is a huge thing. I think given the attention it's had, it will have consequences. And so let's talk a bit about what's happened. So OpenAI have just upgraded their generative image model, and it's directly built into GPT 4.0. So that's one of their models online, and this capability is available to all users, including free ones. And yes, so as Kieran says, the ChatGPT can now produce really high quality, realistic and stylized images. So this is why we're talking about Studio Ghibli, is everyone wants to produce those beautiful anime, Studio Ghibli style photos.
And they do look great. I'd recommend, if you haven't seen any, if you've somehow managed to avoid them over the past couple of weeks, to go online and search some of these, because they look kind of mental.
Yeah, and this crazy step in just the ability to edit and generate, images that aren't actually real. I mean, they're generated by an AI. Has all sorts of consequences. So we were going to call this episode Deepfakes Just Got Real. But because the internet's just blowing up about Studio Ghibli, which we'll go into just now, that's why we called it Studio Ghibli versus OpenAI.
And I think the super obvious concerning part about all of this is that now we've got really realistic photos that can do kind of exactly what you describe. It makes it so much easier to generate deepfakes and misleading and AI generated content that we can't tell is real or not.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think as part of the podcast and our just brand Artificially Ever After, we were thinking of doing courses on detecting deepfakes. That was one of our first ideas, but I just think we can't do that anymore. I don't even know.
So yeah, what are some of the key differences then that's making this model so much better?
So the biggest difference is that the language model, GPT 4.0, used to just handle text, and when you ask to generate an image, it will kind of send your prompt to DALL-E 3, which was a dedicated image model. Now, image generation is handled within the language model. So it's this GPT 4.0 has the image generation built inside it. So it's not a bolt-on tool anymore.
Yeah, we've seen people describing it as this omni-modal model rather than a specialist model. Like you said, it sends it off to DALL-E, which was an image generating model. To do it separately, it's all intertwined in the same AI.
And why is this important? Well, because we've integrated the image generation into the language model, it makes the image generation so much better at understanding your prompt and exactly what you want the AI to generate. So when you send it to DALL-E and this bolt-on tool, DALL-E is not as good at understanding language as GPT 4.0. So that's why we don't get as good adherence to your prompt when it generates images for you, unlike this new model that they've released.
Yeah. Which is, again, one of the things that it's much better at doing is sticking to exactly what you describe and really understanding it. I saw someone describe it so nicely that it's kind of all the knowledge and information that ChatGPT has and that we know we can ask it about almost anything, it's now able to kind of inject that knowledge into each pixel of the image. It's world knowledge that it's got from all the text that it's read. It can also link that with the image generation, which is a crazy concept.
Yeah, and another really cool thing about it is it's getting really good at editing images. So you can just upload an image. And previously, if you upload an image of, say, Batman, and you say, I want him to have a pink cape, what will happen is that the Batman will kind of be a different one with a pink cape. Whereas now it will literally be the exact same Batman, the exact same pose with the pink cape. So it's just really good at editing images and not kind of distorting the stuff that you don't want it changed.
I tried the image editing stuff. It's mind-blowing, yeah. And one other, lastly, a crucial feature, which is a slightly reassuring one, is that kind of integrated into its image generation process, it now includes by default this hidden metadata and kind of like a watermark, which helps to tag the image as being an AI generated. And it also works by, if you make any edits, it shows the kind of editing history and what changes have been made, which sounds fascinating and really positive. But sadly, I think I saw some information about it being kind of easy to be stripped away from the image. So, hopefully that's something that we'll get better at, but it's good to know that these companies are aware of how good the quality is and how hard it is to spot them. So they're kind of working to try and find ways to always let us know if it
raise that barrier of entry of creating deepfakes, right?
Exactly, yeah. Now, just really briefly, I know we do demystifying on the show, and that's our kind of central theme. We just wanted to give a bit of intuition around like what it's doing under the hood and why it might be different. Which basically, as Rick was saying, the main thing is that it's been trained simultaneously with text and image data rather than that being done separately. But the other thing is the fundamental way in which it's generating the images, which we're not going to get too deep into this on a short stuff episode, but we did do an episode which is titled Is AI Art Real Art? That was a long form one, where we talk about the technique in which the AI uses to generate brand new images. And it's a method called diffusion. And it works where you start with kind of random noise. So we kind of gave an intuition about static on a TV, and it's kind of like you're tuning the TV to slowly produce the image from random noise, and it slowly starts to come into focus. What's fundamentally different in this model is that it's using something called autoregressive AI or decoder, and basically what that's doing is rather than just slowly generating the whole image at once, it's doing it kind of sequentially, pixel by pixel or like patch by patch. So you can imagine it going from like left to right and top to bottom. And when you actually use the model now, you can kind of see it generating in that way. They kind of show this cool animation. And just the reason I wanted to touch on that is it gives some intuition about why it's now much better at something that image generation models used to find really difficult, which is writing text. And this is one big capability that people are looking at a lot. And I think has big implications if people want to use it to make diagrams or graphic design stuff, is it now can write pretty well. And that's because it's not trying to write the whole word at once. It's actually doing it pixel by pixel. And it's kind of a lot closer to how humans might draw, right? That it's doing it kind of in strokes and doing it section by section, and what you've just drawn influences what comes next, rather than you just trying to have to, not that humans could ever do this, but you draw the whole image in one single go. One other good thing about it doing it in this kind of sequential step is they've now got multiple checkpoints along the way of the image being generated where they check for policy violations and people generating harmful content. So hopefully it's a lot safer and isn't as easy to break to get people to generate nasty images.
So hopefully that gives a bit of the technical. I know you said let's quickly cover it, but I think it's probably some crazy AI techniques there. It's not actually been openly disclosed how they've done it, right?
Yes, it's all speculation of how exactly it's working, but we have a pretty good grasp. But yeah, what does this all mean though? So looking at the implications now and some of these controversies with Studio Ghibli, do you want to take us through those? Yeah,
this could be pretty big. So we're all talking about Studio Ghibli because many lawyers around the world are saying they're very much within their right to take legal action against OpenAI.
And they're a big company, Studio Ghibli, as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're probably the leaders in probably Japanese anime. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about copyright. But just before that, one quote that everyone's using that Miyazaki has said is...
And he is the founding animator and co-founder of Studio Ghibli, right?
Yes, he says, whoever creates this stuff has no idea what pain is. I'm utterly disgusted. I feel strongly that this is an insult to life itself.
So I think he was referring to AI there, wasn't he, a few years ago?
Yeah, and he's kind of been brought out of context here because he's actually talking about using AI to generate zombies. And he was talking about how he has a friend who has like some motor neuron disease, and it kind of made him upset. But I'm sure he would probably say the exact same thing about what's going on right now.
I was going to say the irony of that, mentioning something like that a few years ago, and now it's kind of come full circle.
Yeah, it's gotten so much worse. So yeah, there's a video online if you want to see that in action. But because of how big this became and how unique the Ghibli style is, it's now clearer than ever that these models are trained on copyrighted data.
Yeah.
And this is a really grey area on the legal domain, and I don't want to bore you with the legalities of it, but the primary defense in the US is something called fair use, and this is where you can use copyrighted content for purposes such as criticism, comment, research, or transformative uses. And right now, AI developers are arguing that training a model on these copyright data is for transformative, non-expressive uses of works. And it does not produce the works verbatim, which we find is not true. If you type in on ChatGPT to recite Harry Potter's first chapter,
it can do it.
It can do it. So something going on there.
And just now, like with the Studio Ghibli stuff, like it's not. Previously, it would just be like subtly look the same, like it was kind of uncanny valley where it was maybe a little bit Studio Ghibli-esque. Now it's like that could easily have been plucked straight out of a Studio Ghibli film. However, it's a scene from like Harry Potter that they've transformed into that. So it's so close now that it's getting murky, isn't it?
Exactly, and the fact that obviously OpenAI is a business now, they're for profit. So the idea that they're just using it for
research,
fair use seems a bit
reach.
wild. And they're currently actually under a lawsuit under the New York Times. So New York Times have sued OpenAI and Microsoft for basically exploiting copyrighted content for profit.
So a lot of legal implications that we're seeing coming, and this may actually end up being an inflection point, mightn't it, with these kind of companies. They've been getting away with so many of these lawsuits, and they've managed to, because a lot of these copyright laws were never intended for generative AI because it wasn't around then when these laws were written. They've been able to weave their way out of them, but that might be starting to change.
Exactly. So what is this going to look like in the long term? Well, if we end up with these huge data audits of having to open source all the data that these models are trained on, we're likely to see a huge performance reduction in these models. They're not going to have as much knowledge. All the best data, that textual data online, tends to be copyrighted because it costs money to generate this high quality data.
Maybe this is a big enough push that it changes the laws now or in the next few years so that our current level of models persists for a few years to come and the progress we've been seeing gets tapered off, perhaps. Yeah.
On the plus side, we get better transparency and we actually know what the models are trained on. Maybe when we open source the data they were trained on, we can now look at the biases. And yes, maybe the biases will become more negative because open source data that you can train AI on tends to be low quality and maybe there's less quality biases in there, but at least we know what the data is exactly.
Correct, yeah.
And lastly, just on some more social, environmental impacts, one of the first things Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, tweeted was, guys, our GPUs are melting, so we're going to have to put some rate limits on images getting generated. So I think whilst this is obviously really cool that we have this new functionality, I think we can't ignore that there's a huge strain on the environment and just... what is it really a good use of energy to be melting a GPU just for a fun photo?
I mean, interestingly as well, like we're talking about the technical differences, this auto-regressive approach which we're now using was invented a long time before diffusion models were actually. And the reason that we invented diffusion and went for that in the first place was because it can generate images a lot more efficiently and requiring smaller models and with a lot less time and energy put into them. So I think interestingly there was a step backwards in terms of efficiency and energy use. So maybe we'll go back to diffusion before we know it.
Yeah.
So we hope that covered a little bit about what's going on. We might do a longer form episode on the technicalities when they come out, but we just wanted to touch on what's happened, why it's happening, and maybe what that means on a legal stance. And we'll see if our favorite animation studio prevails over big tech.
Yeah.
Nice. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll
catch you next time.